listener production.
Hi, it's Helen Smith here with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Tonight, a new round of ordinary Aussies with musical talent will chase the opportunity to become stars overnight while we watch from home. The 14th season of The Voice Australia returns to our screens with a new panel of celebrity judges and high expectations of rating success from the Seven network. But there's more to the lights, music and spinning chairs. Our investigative team here at Listener found it's not the full story, taking a deep dive into music reality TV and discovering a big difference from what we see and what's really going on behind the scenes. In this special bonus episode, you'll hear some extraordinary confessions from former judges and eye-opening stories from ex-contestants too. Last month, we brought you a bonus ep on The Voice, and today we're bringing you a different episode which centres on Australian Idol. This is episode 1 of The Moment It Changed Touchdown, hosted by Nick Kelly.
The following episode has strong language and a mention of suicide.
My memory of being in one of the most insane situations that said to me, wow, I'm actually in a pop band now, was when we performed at Adelaide Shopping Centre. There were 18,000 fans. Some of them had been there for 6 hours, fully dehydrated in the front row, and I just thought, this is madness.
It's the turn of the millennium, and Katie Underwood has gone from unknown singer in a jazz band to member of the biggest girl group in Australia, Bardot.
And it felt really crazy to go from being no one to seemingly everything overnight.
Everything changed for Katie after she landed a spot on a pioneering reality television show called Pop Stars.
There was a proliferation worldwide of boy bands and girl bands at the time, late 90s, early 2000s. Pop Stars was pitched to be a version of the Australian Spice Girls, that it would be a reality TV show where we would be followed with cameras, but no one really knew what that was going to be like because we hadn't seen it.
Pop Stars played out like a documentary, transforming 5 young women into a world-class girl group in a matter of weeks.
It did demystify how things are done, and I think that's why it was so fascinating for people to watch. It was a window in that had not previously been opened.
Pop Stars captivated Australia. Episodes would regularly rake in millions of viewers.
They referred to it as Beatles-level hysteria. Before I offend any Beatles fan, no, I'm not comparing Bardot in any way to Beatles musically, but, you know, per capita, the impact in Australia was definitely on the level.
Pop Stars pioneered the genre of music competition television series we'd see come after it. Shows that continued to sell the dream that anyone could be a superstar. But an all too common story with music competition television is that after the initial hype, the superstar status of many contestants quickly dimmed. And over time, these shows have produced fewer and fewer success stories. I'm Nick Kelly. I live and breathe Australian music. As a radio presenter, a DJ, I ran a record label, and I was one of the millions of Aussies who tuned in when shows like Pop Stars and Australian Idol were starting to rise in popularity. This is the story of music competition television in Australia, how it started and where we're at. For all the glitz and glam on the screen, there's a darker side, which you'll hear about from the people who've lived it. Find out what contestants are asked to give in order to make their mark, and the mark it leaves on them. I'm Nick Kelly, and this is The Moment It Changed Touchdown. When Bardot dropped their self-titled debut album in May 2000, it went double platinum, landing the #1 spot in Australia and New Zealand. Their debut single Poison also shot to #1. While Bardot launched with a bang, Katie says wearing the reality TV badge meant many in the music industry didn't take them seriously.
I got the narrative. Oh, they're just manufactured fake artists. Yes, compared to most average fans who spend years building a following. We hadn't done all that, but we were working as hard as we could.
Less than 2 years after their meteoric rise, Bardot came to a grinding halt when they announced they were splitting up. Everyone from Bardot has a different story on the split. Some saying they wanted to pursue solo careers, others saying gruelling schedules pushed them to the limit. Katie says 25 years on, the once superstar girl group are a distant memory.
We may have been A-list celebrities back then, but I don't even think we'd make the Z-list now.
Popstars continued for another 2 seasons, turning out the group Scandalous and singer Scott Kane. Both acts landed #1 singles. However, shortly after their seasons, they too faded into obscurity. In 2004, Popstars was cancelled due to low ratings. As Popstars was ending in Australia, in the wings was a new music competition TV show promising to take the genre to new heights: Australian Idol.
2002, when Idol fell into my lap, I'm thinking, what a poisonous chalice.
Stephen Tate was an executive producer on Australian Idol for its first 7 seasons. Stephen worried viewers would think Idol was a Popstars copycat.
Australian audiences are quite fickle, and you just have to deliver quality.
And wasn't sure an Australian franchise of the new Idol format would cut through.
At the forefront of my mind is American Idol. Even though it was a success around the world, that's no guarantee that it's going to be a success here in Australia.
American Idol had been a monumental success, pulling in more than 38 million viewers at its peak. The Idol format introduced contestants auditioning to a panel of judges, which for American Idol's first 9 seasons included Simon Cowell. Cowell was an English record executive with BMG Records, and he became infamous for ripping contestants apart for their terrible auditions. When the Australian television network Channel 10 bought the rights to Idol, they had to adhere to the show's format. That included finding a judge to be Australia's very own Simon Cowell.
We even looked at getting Simon Cowell to come out here and do the Australian version as well. And then it was actually Simon who said, "You've got the guy that you should be talking to." He used to share an office with me here in London at BMG, and he mentioned Dicko.
I remember getting the car into the office from the hotel, and on the back seat of the limo were the tabloid papers in the UK, and Simon was on the front cover of 3 out of 4 tabloids in the UK, and I went, what the hell is going on? So I went in, saw Carl, and I went, what is going on with you? What is going on? He went, "Kidder," smoking his cigarette, "you have to do this in Australia. This is going to be fantastic for you. And just quietly, the meaner you are, the more the chicks love you." And that was his advice to me.
Dicko, or Ian Dickson on his CV, was working for BMG Records in Sydney when he got the call about Australian Idol. Dicko didn't so much need the chicks. He had a wife. But the idea of being an Idol judge was tempting. He quickly learnt that Idol wasn't just about launching a music superstar. It was a TV show first and foremost, and that it needed to be entertaining.
The Idol did require a bastard judge, and I guess I was happy to oblige. I realised the role that Simon played and how important that was to the show. And whether we like to admit this or not, ritual humiliation of young singers was kind of part of this. There had to be an element of jeopardy when that young hopeful stood in front of the judges and the cameras. And I was that jeopardy, I guess. I actually did a screen test for Idol for the producers and really was a complete bastard. And I went home that night and could not sleep, and I felt awful. And I talked it over with my wife. I went, I'm not sure I can be the bastard judge.
Dicko didn't want to pass up the opportunity, so he asked the producers for a second screen test.
The only criticism I gave was kind of sugar-coated constructive criticism, and it actually felt worse. Felt a lot worse than being honest. So at that point I said, okay, look, I'm in. I will be a bastard judge, and whatever's going on in my mind, I'm happy to be honest and say that. And that's what I did.
Dicko would be sitting next to American-Australian singer Marsha Hines and another judge who Dicko would spend half his time bickering with.
We did argue an awful lot, which really worked for the show. We were the best of enemies.
Mark Holden.
Mark Holden was born in 1954 and continues to exist, despite my Wikipedia page in which the first question is Mark Holden still alive? I can answer the positive. I exist, still.
Mark Holden, still alive and well, had a career as a pop singer in the late 1970s. He then moved behind the scenes, writing music for everyone from Belinda Carlisle to David Hasselhoff. Mark also became a talent scout, discovering Australian singer Vanessa Amorosi and co-writing her hits like absolutely everybody. But he was still a relatively unknown name to most Aussies when he got the call up to judge Australian Idol.
I have no idea why they chose me, but I'm glad they did, that's for sure. I personally don't enjoy live performing all that much. I'm more a guy who likes to write songs, produce records, manage people, put things together. I'm that kind of a guy. So television to me was fantastic.
Looking back, Dicko thinks it was a massive risk putting the original Australian Idol judges together.
The judging panel on Australian Idol Series 1 is fucking mental. Today, in 2025, if you spoke to a free-to-air network and go, I'm going to get an unknown English bloke with a really bad mullet and two fucking has-beens who are 50-year-olds, right, and we're going to put them as our star panel on your primetime show, they would laugh you out of it. You wouldn't get past reception. But for some reason, this absolutely worked. All of us played our role. I was the bastard pom who would tear a strip off the young, battling teenage Aussie singers. Mark was the crazy uncle who would wear outfits and come up with gobbledygook language. And Marsha was the little life raft of comfort and aid when things got a little feisty either side of her. And all those elements were really needed in this show.
In early 2003, Australian Idol kicked off its nationwide search for the next superstar. The producers had low expectations, but from the auditions alone, they could see they'd hit on something big. Australians knew about American Idol and how it launched Season 1 winner Kelly Clarkson into a superstar and wanted in on the action. Executive producer Stephen Tate remembers being gobsmacked by the audition turnout, especially in Adelaide.
We thought maybe 100 people would show. There were thousands. It went 4 deep, the line, for blocks and blocks and blocks. I rang my boss that morning and I said, you have to see this. In fact, we have to get a news chopper up to actually shoot the size of this queue. That casting tour just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where when we hit Sydney in the end, we filled Darling Harbour all the way around.
One of the contestants who rocked up to the Melbourne auditions was a young Rob Mills, or Millsy, as Australia would come to know him.
So 2003, I'd finished high school a couple of years before that, and a friend of mine from high school was the one that said, you should definitely audition for the show. It was big in America last year. I'd been singing in pubs for 3 years before this, and so I did that, turned up at the audition and gave it a go.
Millsy knew a bit about music competition TV coming into Australian Idol. He'd auditioned for the second season of Pop Stars the year before, but was kicked off thanks to his 2 left feet. Idol was more forgiving when it came to dancing.
I remember talking to the producers years after this, and just as soon as they saw me, they said there was something about me, maybe it's like this boy next door kind of thing, or just this larrikin kind of bloke who had a bit of cheeky charm or whatever.
Millsy's look was peak early 2000s. Spiked hair, eyebrow ring, jeans, sneakers, and dog tag necklace.
And I think having sung in pubs 3 or 4 nights a week for a couple of years really gave me the confidence to stand up in front of anyone and sing.
While thousands queued up to audition, Dicko says not everyone got a chance to perform in front of the judges.
They would have to go through 3 separate auditions before they came before the judges. And that whole process was designed to take the middle out. so that the only artists you saw for television were the very, very good and the very, very bad. And the reason is because there's a lot of people who can sing, and ultimately, who gives a fuck? It's like you've got to be great for TV, and if you're going to be great for TV and present an amazing personality, then we've got half a chance of selling some records and making you a star.
Broadcasting the terrible auditions was an order from the top, according to executive producer Stephen Tate.
The bad singers, we were directed to keep them. That was part of the format. Not a part of my career that I'm proud of. To ridicule somebody who clearly doesn't have talent is just cruel. And it should never have happened, frankly. But it did. Honestly, I think we were laughing at them, not with them. And I just don't think that's fair.
If a contestant scored a yes from at least 2 judges during their audition, they received a golden ticket and would progress through to the top 100. Millsy scored a golden ticket, and for the first time, the contestants were handed a contract.
Once you get into the top 100, a lawyer turns up to talk through it all. If you want to go past the top 100, you have to sign these 3 contracts. A record deal, 3 years of your likeness and everything about you to a company that's going to do all your merchandising, and you also signed a management contract.
At the time, Millsy didn't pay much attention to the fine print in these contracts. Signing and potentially kickstarting a music career was far better than no contract at all.
Once you sign this, the option is ours to take up this option. It's not yours, it's ours. And I was like, well, why not? I was just enjoying the ride. So, yeah, we all signed up.
It wasn't until years later the fine print in these contracts would be realised, with some contestants coming forward saying they had signed their lives away. When Australian Idol premiered in late July 2003, Mark says no one anticipated how massive the show would become.
Suddenly, boom, the very next day, I mean literally the next day, it was just that big. It was huge.
For the first few weeks of episodes, Australia tuned in to watch the auditions, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Then they cheered on their favourites as the top 100 were whittled down to a top 12. This was when the competition got serious. Not only were the top 12 singing to the judges and a studio audience, now they were singing live on television to the entire country. The Australian public had become the unofficial fourth judge. Week after week, the millions of viewers could text message a number that appeared on their TV screen to keep their favourite in the competition. It's estimated that Aussies spent $25 million voting for contestants just during season 1 of Idol. Mark was awestruck that everyday Aussies spent their hard-earned money on keeping someone they didn't know in the show.
That's insane. That's some crazy stuff. It's just give me money. Oh my God, what a concept. That's fantastic. They're doing it 50 times, 60 times, spending dad and mum's money. Holy crap, that's what was happening. They were milking mum and dad's credit cards. Fantastic.
When the top 12 had been crunched to the top 5, Australia got an insight into how the music industry really operated, and it wasn't pretty. Dicko came out swinging after Paulini, one of the contestants, sang Survivor by Destiny's Child. Dicko didn't so much critique the performance. Instead, he made some very pointed remarks on what Paulini was wearing. It became known as the gold dress incident and has gone down as one of the most controversial and memorable moments in Australian Idol history.
Honestly, if she was one of my artists and we were in the boardroom looking at an outfit for a red carpet, there's no way we would let that go. And I just thought, no, you got to jump in. And I said it. I said, you need to choose more appropriate wardrobe or shed some pants. And it was like setting a bushfire alight. First and foremost, in the studio, I felt an icy cold chill down my back from the audience behind me. I even saw camera people like mouthing what the fuck to me. Went into the office the next day and everyone fucking hated me. My wife slept with her back to me that night. The kids, before going to school in the morning, said, "You've ruined our fucking lives, Dad." I couldn't take it back. And what's more, I actually meant it. I was okay with it back then. Probably wouldn't be now.
Executive producer Stephen Tate remembers the gold dress incident making national headlines.
It was huge. The press was all over it. The mags were all over it. Breakfast radio was all over us the following morning. I have to say I wasn't comfortable. I didn't like seeing a young woman being made to feel self-conscious about her body. Did it need to be said? No, not really. But that was the format. In his professional world, he would say it behind closed doors directly to the artist. You, for once, as audience, got to see what we do almost every day in television.
In the years since Dicko's comments, Paulini has spoken publicly about the impact his words had and the toll it took on her confidence. Other Idol stars have also denounced the criticism. And while it's gone down in infamy in Australian pop culture, it doesn't exactly seem to have made a big impact on Dicko's career. Not in the way a comment like that to a young woman would be received today. While Dicko's sexist comments landed him in temporary hot water, Mark Holden became famous for something else, the touchdown. In a nutshell, when Mark really loved a performance, he would jolt up out of his seat, swing his arm in the direction of the contestant and scream, "Touchdown." Mark didn't care that a touchdown actually meant a scoring play in the American football game Gridiron, and neither did the viewers.
It's something that just erupted, and then the audience loved it, so I did it again. It was that simple, really. Really. And then they liked it, and so I did it again. And then I said, I'm going to make it bigger than that next time, I was just loving that red light, man.
When Mark says red light, he's talking about the cameras going live.
That red light, that live red light, knowing that you're going to 3 million people and that they literally can't stop you. They literally cannot stop you. It's fantastic, man.
Touchdown may have started as a gimmick. However, Dicko says it became a staple of the show.
To the point where people would say, it was good, but was it a touchdown?
Dicko admits he was a little salty that his judging panel rival came up with the touchdown and not him.
And I would get the shits with that like you wouldn't. A touchdown is nonsense. Doesn't mean a thing. But look, Mark not only invented touchdown, he developed it, he stood by it, and he turned it into a bona fide piece of entertainment currency. He absolutely understood what this show needed, even if it made him look a bit foolish or clownish at times.
By November 2003, after thousands of auditions around the country, 4 months on air, and millions of Aussies watching week in, week out, Australia had chosen its final two. It was between Guy Sebastian, the 21-year-old church singer from Adelaide, and 27-year-old farmer Shannon Noll.
What an incredible final two. You've got Shannon Noll. He was a straight-backed, decent-looking bloke, ochre, with the faintest whiff of fuckboy about him, had spent his life in rural Australia. And I think at that time, Australia was drought-ridden. So I think we were looking towards rural Australia and having a level of empathy for people in that environment against an Asian background guy who's a devout Christian who sings R&B. And, it was a brilliant choice for the final of Australian Idol to offer a clear dichotomy for the nation.
The finale was broadcast live from the Sydney Opera House. Executive producer Stephen Tate remembers watching the votes pour in.
I can tell you now, Guy received 1 million votes on the winning voting period for the final night of Australian Idol alone. 1 million votes. So if Guy got 1 million votes, imagine what the total was. I don't know that I've ever seen a vote since at that level.
Australia had chosen and voted Guy Sebastian as the winner of Australian Idol. His winning single, Angels Brought Me Here, went straight to number 1 on the Australian ARIA singles chart and was the highest selling song of the decade in Australia. His debut album also sold 160,000 copies in its first week. Most Australian artists were lucky to sell that many albums in a year, let alone in 1 week. Other Idol contestants shared in the glory. Runner-up Shannon Knowles' first album, That's What I'm Talking About, spawned 2 number-1 singles and sold over 350,000 copies. Millsy, who came in 5th, was picked up by BMG for a record deal and came off Idol with all sorts of job offers.
I was getting paid to just turn up to nightclubs and not even sing, just to turn up. Maybe anywhere between maybe 3,000 and 6,000. I remember I did 2 in one night. I was exhausted. There's a lot of hands to shake, a lot of signing, a lot of high fives, a lot of hugs, a lot of kisses. The whole thing was just so weird and bizarre to me.
However, Dicko says Guy Sebastian's success was truly unrivaled.
About 3 months after Guy was crowned Idol, myself and Ed St. John, the chairman of BMJ, we went out with Guy for a pasta lunch, very casual. And at the end of this lunch with Guy, Ed handed him an A4 folded envelope with his name on. He said, "What's this?" He said, "It's your first royalty check from BMG." He went, "What? What's that?" He said, "It's the money we owe you for all the records we've sold over Christmas." He went, "Oh, fantastic." And he opened it, took a check out, and he said, "Guy Sebastian, $1 million. That was an amazing moment. I'd never done that before, and I haven't done it since.
After the success of season 1, a second season of Australian Idol was a no-brainer. When Casey Donovan auditioned in early 2004, she was an immediate standout.
I'll just paint the scene. 2004, a 16-year-old teenager studying at the Australian Institute of Music. An ad popped up late at night. My stepfather, Norman, was watching TV and it said, auditions for Australian Idol, X, Y, and Z, whenever they were. So he had a grand idea I would audition for Australian Idol. He came down to my room and he's like, "Queso, I think it would be great if you could audition." And I was like, "Certainly not." He's like, "Well, basically an ultimatum. If you don't audition, we'll be taking you out of a music school and you can just, go back to doing public school or drop out, basically." I was like, this is unfair, as a 16-year-old teenager also would have done. So there was a lot of colourful language that went with that request.
A reluctant Casey rocked up to the Entertainment Centre in Sydney's Darling Harbour to audition for Season 2 of Australian Idol.
The line went for kilometres, basically stayed all day there and then finally got in, got through and did that and then went to another room to see all the producers in another table and then got asked if I had anything else to sing. I sung Casey Chambers' A Million Tears. And then they're like, "Do you sing anything else? You look like a bit of a rock chick." And I went, "Yep, I know Nirvana, Metallica." I think I ended up singing, I can't remember, but it must have been something along the lines of Smells Like Teen Spirit or something from Incubus.
When Casey auditioned in front of the judges, she was a shoo-in for the top 100 and throughout the heats, quickly guaranteed herself a spot in the top 12. More than once, Mark Holden was taken aback by Casey.
Casey made me cry. I literally was on a live television stage with lights and everything, people around me crying. I wasn't trying to do that. It's what she brought out from me and the connection she had with me. And I know she had that same connection with everybody that was watching her.
Not only was Casey new to the television machine, she was still a teenager. She was thrown in front of the camera and pushed to answer questions that detailed nearly every aspect of her life.
I think the way I was packaged and produced for a television audience was I was 16. I had dreadlocks. I wore boys' clothes. I wore different coloured shoes. I wasn't the popular looking person. I was, bigger. I was left of centre. I was different. So that was one part of my package. The other part of my package was I was Indigenous. So I was this young Indigenous 16-year-old from Bankstown, Western Sydney, from a working class family who could sing. I just remember being asked, what is it about, being Indigenous? How does that help you move forward? And at that point I was like, I don't know, I'm just Casey. And when I don't know how to answer something, I go very, very quiet. And that became evident throughout the show is, she doesn't talk. It was just this thing of I was literally growing up in a TV show.
Just like the contestants from season 1, Casey was catapulted into people's living rooms and became a celebrity overnight.
Going from having a handful of friends at school to then walking around and people knowing me, knowing my backstory, knowing my family, knowing basically everything there was to know about me was very confronting, confusing and overwhelming. And it was unusual to kind of find your feet in a world where you just were now something that people could touch. There's certainly a level of ownership when you're in these shows where people are voting for you and they're using their money. They had bought something and that was you. There was always this pressure when you'd go out, like to get photos and give people hugs, and these are just random people off the side of the street. You know, imagine someone coming up to someone and, or you saying, "Can I have a hug?"
Casey grew up on Australian Idol. The public watched as she went from a shy, grungy 16-year-old to a burgeoning performer who scored 4 Mark Holden touchdowns. They are the metric for success in the Idol world after all. In November 2004, Casey won the second season of Australian Idol, and the entertainment machine kicked up another gear.
I just remember that following day was the day from hell. Waking up to do breakfast radio. I had the publicist rock up my door with cakes and coffees. I didn't sleep. I was wired. I was this 16-year-old kid that had just won a competition. And then as soon as my press day finished, I was then moved to stay in this hotel and go straight into a recording studio with songs that I've picked out maybe a few weeks prior. It was crazy.
With the festive season fast approaching, Casey was pushed to her absolute limit in the studio to get the album out before Christmas.
I don't know how I got through it, and to the point where one producer pushed me so hard that my voice died. Like, it was horrible. You're singing, you're doing so many takes, and they want everything verbatim to how the track is. I was sleeping on a beanbag and then getting woken up to do takes, and, you know, if you put a different inflection, they're like, no, and you're like, well, am I singing the song?
In between power naps on a beanbag, Casey asked her label if they could include one of her original songs. She played it for them, and it ended up on the album, with Casey credited for the writing, along with 3 others. In the industry at the time, it wasn't uncommon for artists to come with their original songs and end up with only around half the rights to them after some minimal changes from others.
But anyway, it was a horrible experience and a horrible time, but we got it done in 5 days.
After supercharging through recording, Casey's debut album, For You, was released in December 2004, less than a month after her Idol win. The album included her debut single, Listen With Your Heart, which shot to #1 in Australia. Casey then immediately hit the road, performing on a national tour with the Idol Top 12. However, when the tour was over, Casey felt her career was quickly losing momentum. She wasn't recording any new music and didn't have any future tours lined up.
I've had these moments of high and merely a millisecond later, a low. And it's just been this constant thing. And I'm like, when does it end? When does it get better?
Less than 2 years after winning Australian Idol, Casey was suddenly dropped by her label BMG.
At the time, it didn't feel nice because I was also still a teenager at this point, and I was like, well, what am I doing? Like, I had just had the highest of high highs to then be released from my contract and kind of just, oh, okay, bye. I was like, oh. It was a time. Then I was like, okay, well, I guess we just get a job, and that's exactly what I did.
To pay the bills, Casey took a job as a receptionist at a medical centre.
People would come in and I'd be answering phones and telling people to come in and, you know, getting their Medicare cards, and they'd be like, aren't you Casey? Sorry, aren't you Casey Donovan? I'd be like, yeah, good morning. Hi, how are you? Just take a seat. The doctor will be out in a minute. They'd be like, oh, why? Well, why? I voted for you. Like, why are you here? And I'd get this pity look. And I was like, don't be like, just here, you know, working a 9 to 5.
When the media found out, the story made national headlines, and they weren't kind.
Having newspapers kind of come forward and, you know, call me a forgotten idol and what have yous, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I need to earn money to live, So therefore, I'm going to earn money to live. I think being still so young, I was able to then recreate and grow. And I come from a very working class family and, you know, hard work is good work and shit happens. So you kind of just go, all right, what's next? And that's the attitude I kind of, have just kept with me as I've gone through life.
Millsy was also dropped by BMG.
So after the record company dropped me, I was back labouring every day just because I needed income. Did you used to be Millsy? It was maybe a few times I heard that. Doing something mundane like labouring gives you the time to ponder your life and what you want to do. I had no idea who the hell I was, but everyone seemed to have an idea of who I was.
Millsy points to a particular moment that captures where his head was at the time.
Straight after the show, up on the Gold Coast, I was mobbed, not punched or anything like that, but just mobbed like, Millsy, get a photo, Millsy. Like, I felt so overwhelmed. I realised later I was having a full-blown panic attack. I think we just jumped in someone's car and just told them to drive. Got back to the hotel. Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, fine, yeah, good. You go to bed. And I went up to my room and noticed that the door to my balcony on the 36th floor or something was open, and I just had that split second moment of like, you can just end it. You don't have to worry about the panic or the crazy anymore. You can jump. And I ran to the door and just slammed it. I was like, fuck, that is dark. That's a very dark thought. I still get emotional thinking about it. Yeah. I still get really sad for that kid who was just so scared, had no idea. And now I go, what a life I've had, what experiences I've got to have because of just knowing that, you don't have to do that. It still gets me, like, lucky for me, I know who I am. I have a very good sense of self. I've got great friends, great self-worth. But I think it's just when I think back to that kid, I go, that poor kid, he didn't know. And no one was there to go, hey, mate, it's going to be a bit shit for a bit.
During his time on Australian Idol, Millsy doesn't recall a psychologist or any mental health support being available to help contestants through or after the show.
Welfare? I don't think mental health existed or we knew about it, or no, the networks were not forthcoming in that.
Casey says during season 2, there was a psychologist on site, but she didn't necessarily feel like confiding in them.
I was a 16-year-old who smoked a pack of ciggies a day. If I wasn't getting interviewed or learning songs, I was outside smoking like a bloody chimney. Like, that's how I passed the time. And the psych would usually come out and try and chat to me.
The mental health of contestants took more of a front seat in later seasons of Australian Idol, according to executive producer Stephen Tate.
So by involving psychologists in the program, which we did as the franchise evolved, we became much better at working out whether somebody was going to benefit from the experience or be damaged by it.
While Australian Idol launched its contestants into the spotlight, for many, their stardom only lasted a hot minute. They were quickly overshadowed by the next season's cast of hopefuls, and then that cast were overshadowed by the season that followed them. Mark Holden believes BMG Records, the record company attached to Australian Idol, should have done more to launch the careers of its contestants while the show was airing.
They have this television show that 3 million people are watching, and they're going, no, don't put the record out. No, we're just going to do one person. We're not going to sell 20 records. We're going to just sell one. And we're going to wait for the whole show to be over, and then we're going to sell it. Stupid motherfuckers. 3 million people watching. Press buy now. Send me record in mail tomorrow. Simple concept, man. It was a golden moment. All of them should have had a big hit. And they go, no, we're not going to. No, we've got to wait to see who the winner is. It's a once-in-a-lifetime smash. And they think, no, let's wait till it's cold and dead in the water.
Dicko, who worked for BMG and represented their interests on the judging panel, argues the record label did everything they could to strike while the iron was hot.
There was not really an opportunity for us to release anything earlier than we did. We would have diminished the impact of the winner's single if we'd have drip-fed a bunch of half-baked releases leading up to that. There had to be a primacy for the winner. That has to have a halo effect around it that can't be touched. Otherwise, we're not doing right by the format and not doing right by the winner.
Mark thinks the legacy of Idol was letting new artists bypass the traditional methods of getting a foot in the door.
One of the beautiful things that Idol did was that Idol took out the white lens of the pre-Idol era of record companies. There was mostly white blokes, a handful of white women, but mainly 95% white blokes. And what Idol did was just bring whoever happened to be in Australia, which is a whole lot of different people, including Casey, including Guy, and they got to just go straight to the public and cut out the middleman, cut out the gatekeepers at those stupid record companies.
Once again, Dicko has a different take.
I don't think Idol changed the record industry at all. I think Idol changed the TV industry and changed the life of a few lucky individuals, mine included. If it had changed the music industry, we would still be seeing it. We were a blip, a fucking big blip, but it was a blip.
While Australian Idol didn't guarantee Millsy and Casey lifelong careers as recording artists, it was definitely a launching pad into other opportunities. Both pivoted into musical theatre, with Millsy performing in Wicked and Hairspray, and Casey in the Sapphires, 9 to 5 and Sister Act, the latter being her first leading role.
I will never bash Idol. It built me my career and it has given me the path and the step to get into this industry. Yes, it could have done some different things, but at the end of the day, it's put me here. There are so many Idol kids peppered throughout the Australian music industry. And you've got like voices like Guy Sebastian and Shannon Noll and Ricky Lee and Em Rusciano and Matt Corby and Wes Carr. It created this group of humans that don't come through the normal line of, singing at pubs or doing the hard yakka. And I remember there was a lot... I can't remember who it was, got up at the Arias and basically blasted all the Idol kids because you haven't worked hard and you haven't done the hard yards. It's like, mate, I dare you to go on a show like Australian Idol and come out the other side with your mind and your heart and your soul still intact, because it was a different world.
Whether or not Australian Idol changed the music industry, the mark it left on Australian culture is undeniable. Contestants Guy Sebastian and Jessica Mauboy are still selling records and touring today, and you'd be hard-pressed to find someone above the age of 25 in Australia who doesn't know the name Shannon Noll. Australian Idol ran for 7 seasons until, like pop stars before it, the show was canned in 2009 due to lagging ratings. It was revived by Channel 7 in 2023. However, since coming back, the show has produced even fewer artists going on to major careers in music. In the next episode, we're diving back into the years after the original Australian Idol. It's now the early 2010s, and Australian TV is flooded with talent competition shows, each churning out new winners every year. The competition to become Australia's next music superstar had been turned up to 11. And contestants would have to fight harder than ever to stand out.
I really felt like I needed some kind of backstory or point of difference. I just didn't trust that I could just be myself and just sing.
When you're about to go on stage, you're meant to hype yourself up, be like, I can do this, I'm great at this, I know all the words, but then what do? I forget the words.
That's next time on The Moment It Changed, Touchdown. If this episode has raised any issues for you, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14.
That was episode 1 of The Moment It Changed, Touchdown. If you'd like to hear more about what really happens behind the scenes of music reality TV, you can listen to all the episodes of this fascinating documentary series wherever you get your podcast. We've popped the links in the show notes so you can head there. Thanks for listening to this bonus ep of The Briefing. That's it for now. The team will be back in your feed with the headlines and a deep dive tomorrow morning. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.
listener.